Hi guys, so today I just wanted to do a bit of a, how can I say, a different video. So I just wanted to talk about how to learn French and really my impression on learning a new language. So really there are a few things that I wanted to talk about. I call them rule or I call them effect, just to give them a name, and it will be easier for us to remind ourselves what these things are. So when during my video I will talk about them, you can refer to this video to know what I'm talking about. The first one I wanted to say, it's what I called, well that's my invention, that's what I called the Thomas rule. Thomas rule is that in fact you don't pronounce the last letter in French. So I would say 97% of the time you will be right if you don't pronounce the last letter, and you have to learn the exceptions of the words that you have to pronounce the last letter. So I call that the Thomas rule because in fact my name in French is not Thomas but Thomas. So you don't pronounce the last letter. Think about it, like you don't say Paris but you're saying Paris. You don't say croissant but you're saying croissant. You don't say restaurant but you say restaurant. So you never pronounce the last letter most of the time. So I would advise you not to pronounce it and learn the exception rather than the other way around. So think about it when I'm going to say the Thomas rule, that's what I'm talking about. Don't pronounce the last letter. The other thing that I've experienced when I was learning English actually is what I called myself the Mother-of-Pearl Effect. So for those of you who don't know what mother-of-pearl is the inside of an oyster, for instance. So it's kind of like a pearl material. That's the mother-of-pearl. And I'm talking about the mother-of-pearl effect is that once I've learned that word when I was, learning English. I learned that word. And I was thinking, that's useless. I'm never going to use that word anymore. So why am I learning this? And I was thinking, okay, this word is useless. I'm not supposed to learn it. But I don't know why. I remembered it. And later on in London, when I was in the museum, and I was watching, the object in the museum, I looked at the description of one object, and I could see that the object was made of wood, and it was made of mother-of-pearl. So in fact, I smiled, myself, and I was thinking, well actually, this is a word that I thought would be useless, but in fact now, I'm able to understand what is the material of this object, because I learned that word. So what I mean by that is that nothing is useless. If you learn a language and if you really want to be fluent in the language, then nothing is useless. And you will be surprised that sometimes a word that you learned somewhere, you realize that this word can be used in other contexts, and actually you realize that there's nothing useless. It's always something useful. You can always talk about this word, using this word in different contexts. So that's what I call the mother-of-pearl effect, which is in fact nothing is useless when you're learning a language, when you're learning French for instance. The other effect that I call that the BamboozleShenanigan Effect. So one day I learned these words, to bamboozle and shenanigan. So to bamboozle in English means if you're not telling the truth, you try to kind of lie to someone. And a shenanigan is something canny, something a bit crafty, like you something a bit witty. And I learned these words, and I was using them almost like 30 times a day, just to know how to use them. And to know how to, so in order to know how to use them in context, I was using them all the time, to the point that actually my former flatmate was like tired of it, and he was like, yeah Tom, we understand that. But the point what I want to make with this effect is that when you learn a word, it's up to you to use it in context. So it's not just you learn a word and then suddenly, okay, you don't use it at all anymore, but use it, recycle it. Don't stop. Okay, you learn a new verb, then boom, use it, and try all the context, all the possible context, and then you will see it works in that context, maybe not in that context. But the more you're going to use it, the more you're going to recycle it, and the better it will be for you. So a lot of you know a lot of French words, but when you talk, you don't use them. So it's up to you to recycle your knowledge and keep, you know, when you speak, just try to use as much word that you know. You know, try to use as many words that you know, and don't ask, oh, how do you say this, how do you say that, but in fact try to recycle already what you know. So that's what I called the bamboozle and shenanigan effect. The other one is what I call the football effect. The football effect, because football is not my hobby at all. I don't care about football. I don't know anything about football, and I don't even want to talk about football. And I call that the football effect because, in fact, when you're learning a language, it's good to learn words about your topic, about what you're gonna speak of. If I'm meeting an English person, there's very few chances that I'm gonna talk about football. So I don't know anything about football. Now, because I've lived in England for so many years, I know some words about football. But before, when I arrived, I knew no words, and I was fine because I'm never talking about football. But I like music. So I learned these musical terms because I know that if I want to speak to someone, the chances are that I'm gonna talk about music and not about football. So just try to narrow down as well the words that you want to learn, because you know for sure that the probability is that you will need these words at some point. So learn these words, and that's what I call the football effect. You have to play intelligent and try to learn the words that for sure you're gonna use. Then we have what I called le sans doute effect. Sans doute effect. Sans doute in French means without a doubt. That's literally what it means in English, without a doubt. Sans, without, doute, doubt. Without doubt. But in fact, sans doute means maybe. So it's the complete opposite. And I call that the sans doute effect. What that means is that in French, like in any languages, the words, the verbs that are very used are the most irregular, or are the one that has a different meaning, or sometimes the meaning has been changed over the years. So it looks like the thing is very irregular. The language is so irregular. But in fact, you have to appreciate the fact that it is irregular because people are using these things. So it's the words that are the most used that are the most irregular. If you think about a verb that is never used, it's very irregular. But the verb that are the most common verbs are of course irregular because they've been altered, they've been changed through the years. So that I call the sans doute effect, which in fact sans doute now means the complete opposite. It doesn't mean without doubt, it means in fact with doubt, because it means maybe. So it's because it's been used so many times that the meaning has changed. So don't be fooled thinking, oh, French is so difficult because there's so many exceptions. In fact, there are exceptions, but they are the common words, common nouns. But you will be surprised that actually there are some regularities and there are some verbs which are not necessarily always irregular. Another thing is what I call the j'ai acheté effect. J'ai acheté effect, you know that in English some words are finishing with the letters GHT, and if you pronounce it in a French way, it's j'ai acheté, which means I have bought, j'ai acheté. And that is a way for me to remember, because I never remembered what the letters were, GHT. And that helped me when I said j'ai acheté, that means something in French. So it was an easier way for me to remember. And when you're learning a language, you can't just learn like that things. You have to find small tricks that helps you to remember. And that's what I call the j'ai acheté. When I realized that if you pronounce these letters in a French way, j'ai acheté, it means something in French, and therefore it would be easier for me to remember. And then from that day, I remembered. So it's up to you to find your own tricks and your own things. A Spanish friend once told me that if he wanted to say in French, je ne comprends pas, I don't understand, he was kind of saying the Spanish thing, yo compran pan, which is kind of, I buy bread. So he was saying with the French way, I buy bread in Spanish, and that means I don't understand in French. So it was an easy way for him to understand and to remember these words. So it's up to you to find the tricks, mnemotechnic tricks, to help you to remember what you're learning. And then the last one is what I call the youthful effect. Youthful, It's a French expression which means it is necessary, and is what we call a Gallicism, which is a French exception. So it's something that is found only in French. It's a very authentic French expression, and I strongly advise you to use them. So try not to go on things that make sense in English or in your own language, but try to, if you translate it back into your own language, you realize that, oh, this French sentence doesn't make sense at all in my language. Then you can be sure that they are authentic things. So try not to go all the time for the words that are similar in your own language, but try to go for the words that are not similar at all, because the priority is they are very authentic and they are a way, you know, the way French people are talking. So if you use il faut, then this is an authentic way of saying something in French, which is a bit more authentic than il est nécessaire, which you don't necessarily use that much, but we say il faut. So try to use things that don't really make sense in your own language, because you can be sure that they are French authentic. And that's it really. So these are my tricks, and when I'm gonna talk about this effect in my videos, now you know what we're talking about. Now we know what we're talking about. Okay? Au revoir!